big Chobisi states, only two big states remain, Parvat and Parvat, extra. Other Chobisi states were very minor, of no significance at all. And that's why the name of Rajendra Lakshmi, or the contribution of Rajendra Lakshmi, is not lesser than other things. Now, I don't want to give the full details of this conflict. It is not possible to give, but I just want to mention that when Rajendra Lakshmi assumed the regency, and while Bahadur Shah was sent into exile, the Chobisi states realized the extraordinary character of that. Isn't it? A woman, isn't it, who can send his blood, you can send the brother of his husband to exile, or who can get a kind of moral victory against Bahadur Shah. That moment is of a very extraordinary. And that's why the Chobisi states, all the 5 Chobisi states, came under one alliance. Tanamu, Kaski, Lomjung, Palpa and Parvat, these were the 5. They came under a very big alliance, and one joint force of these 5 states were created under the leadership of Garud Dhojpan. Garud Dhojpan was the commander of this Chobisi states. Under the leadership of Garud Dhojpan, there was a joint army of all these Chobisi states. And there was a great battle between this combined Chobisi army and the Nepalese army under the leadership of Amar Singh Thapa and Damodar. The Nepalese army was led by Amar Singh Thapa and Damodar. So there was a big battle at Sirancho, and in that battle the Alliance army was defeated, and it was a great achievement of the Nepalese army. The Nepalese army under the leadership of Amar Singh Thapa and Damodar defeated the joint army of Chobisi states led by Garud Dhojpan at the battle. Yes, the battle of Sirancho was won by the Nepalese army. But it does not mean that these Chobisi states were conquered. And in order to conquer these Chobisi states, Rajendra Lakshmi again had to fight some battle with them. And in their battle, the most important thing here is that Palpa and Parvat, they remain neutral. And when they remain neutral, then the 3 Chobisi states, Kaski, Lomjung and Tanamu, they were conquered. So during the time of Rajendra Lakshmi, the 3 big Chobisi states, Kaski, Lomjung and Tanamu, were conquered, and the remaining important Chobisi states were now only Parvat and Parvat. And the war which took place between the joint force of these 3 Chobisi states and Nepalese army was at Makaidara. You know, it was fought at Makaidara, at Lomjung, and in that war of Makaidara, the Chobisi forces were defeated by Nepal. Now see, in the unification of Nepal, I will discuss it later on also, the fate also played a very important part. Isn't it? Now, people may not give importance to this, but sometimes the faith also plays very important. Now, during the time of Prithaman Shah, Nepal lost the battle at Satau, and one of his commanders was killed, and another commander was taken war prisoner. And that means fate was against the Nepalese army. That's why. But this time, in the battle of Mokaigara, fate was against the Chobisi. And the Nepalese army got victory over the Chobisi. So during the time of Rajendra Lakshmi, these three big Chobisi states, Kartiloni and Tarun, were conquered by Nepal, and it was a very big achievement in the process of the unification of Nepal, or in the process of the expansion of newly created Nepal. Because you know, after these three big Chobisi states were conquered by Rajendra Lakshmi, many other small countries of the Chobisi states, for example, Garahu, Satahu, Rising, Virpur, all of these small states in the Chobisi states voluntarily surrendered before them. Without a war, they voluntarily surrendered. And when they voluntarily surrendered, a new system developed at that time. And that system, you know, that system was useful for Rajendra Lakshmi and Raju Shah for the unification of Nepal. But later it became a great problem. And the question is that when these small states voluntarily surrendered before the Nepalese army, they were given some autonomous status. The king of those small states were retained with some administrative and judicial power. It is clear? And that system continued up to 1962. You know, and even after 1962, 4 states were given the status of Rajya: Bajrang, Jabalpur, Salyan and Mustan. Have you followed? So that state system developed during the time of Rajendra Lakshmi. That means they adopted a policy according to which if any small state voluntarily surrendered, the status of the Raja was able to be continued with some administrative and judicial power. But later it became a great headache for them. Even after the end of the Rana regime in 1951, there were more than 25 or 26 such Rajyas which were autonomous. And there was the Raja, and he enjoyed some kind of judicial and administrative power. And the Congress government of 1959-60 under B.P. Koirala, first of all, the Congress government abolished the state court. Now you know, Salyan, Bajrang, maybe, Jabalpur, they do have their own state court. And the Raja of that state was the Chief Justice. And the justice was delivered by him. That means a state within a state. A state within the state of Nepal. That was the situation. And when the state court was established by the Congress government under B.P. Koirala, there were many opposition, especially the king of, not king, but the Raja of Bajrang, greatly opposed it. And later on, after the ending of the parliamentary democracy in 1960, in 1962, King Mahendra abolished all these Rajyas. And only 4 Rajyas were given the title of the Raja. That's all. No other autonomous. And that's why, you know, some of the writers say that the unification process started by Prithaman Shah was completed only by King Mahendra. That is also said. because up to the time of King Mahendra, those autonomous states existed. And it was King Mahendra who took a great decision in 1962 to abolish all these. And that concept of Rajya, that concept of the autonomous state was it originated during the time of Rajendra Bahadur Shah, because some of the small states voluntarily surrendered before they come. And that's why the autonomous status was detailed. And at that time, it became very easy for Rajendra Lakshmi and Bahadur Shah to conquer those small states without battle. But later on, it became a great area. Anyhow, so this is the contribution of Rajendra Lakshmi. Now we come to the contribution of Bahadur Shah. Now Rajendra Lakshmi died in 1795. She became the regent of her minor son for about 8 years, from 1777 to 1795. And after she died, Bahadur Shah returned from India, from India, and as he was the nearest relative of the king, he was the uncle of the king, and the king was still 10 years old, still minor. So Bahadur Shah could easily become the regent of his minor age nephew. That means after Rajendra Lakshmi, Bahadur Shah assumed the regency. He became the regent of his minor nephew. And now, after becoming the regent, Bahadur Shah continued the unification work left by his father and by Rani, the wife of his father. Now this time, one most important thing here we should mention is that among the Chaubishi states, now there were only two big Chaubishi states, Parvat and Pal. And among them also, Palpa was most strong. And Palpa was also ruled by the Sena. Palpa was most powerful, and Bahadur Shah realized that at the teeth of opposition of Palpa, it would be very difficult for him to continue the kingdom. It would be very difficult to conquer the other Chaubishi states and the Baisi state in Karnataka. And that's why Bahadur Shah contracted a kind of matrimonial alliance with the Raja, with the king of Palpa. He married the princess of Palpa. And after this marriage, Palpa promised to support Nepal in the conquest of the other areas. And at best, Palpa promised to be neutral in some cases. In every possible case, Palpa promised to help Nepal in the conquest of those Chaubishi states. And where not possible, Palpa at least would maintain a neutrality. So with the help and neutrality of Palpa, Bahadur Shah extended his territory in Nepal. Now the extension of territory during the time of Bahadur Shah was very strict. Now Rajendra Lakshmi could conquer only 3 big Chaubishi states in her tenure of office for 8 years. But Bahadur Shah, within a few months, within 6 months, he could capture most of the states in Gandaki and also in Karnataka. Now, the commander which he employed in this affair, there were several, and I shall give you the name and their contribution in the unification of Nepal later on. But this time it will be sufficient to say that now Gulbi was conquered first, then Arga, then Khasi, then Dhurko, then Parva, and all these territories were conquered, then followed the Bhutan, Dan, Rolpa. Now, within 6 months, the political boundary of Nepal reached to Giri. It was so sweet. Because almost all the states in Karnali, they were very minor states, and that's why with the conquest of almost all the states, remaining states of Chobisi and the Baisi states, within 6 months, the political boundary of Nepal reached up to Beri River. Then again, Bahadur Shah sent the additional forces, and that Nepalese forces conquered far western area, that is Daile, Assam, Jumla, Doti, and other areas. That means, now it will be sufficient to say here is that the unification work, which was started by Prithviraj Shah, was finally completed by Bahadur Shah. Because almost all the Chobisi and Baisi states were conquered by Prithviraj Shah during a very short period, but except that we must notice. Not only except Palmar, but at the time of the conquest of these areas, some of the areas conquered by Nepal were given to Palmar as a reward. So, with the support of Palmar, Bahadur Shah conquered almost all the Chobisi and Baisi. And here also, two things are important to mention, just as a part of the unification. The first one is that Bahadur Shah had given the instruction to his commanders that if any state voluntarily surrenders before the Nepalese army, the autonomous status of that state should be given. Then, if such state voluntarily surrendered before the Nepalese army, there should be no violent activity in those states. The life and property of the people of those areas should be protected. So these were the two guidelines given by Bahadur Shah to his commanders before he started the conquest activity. But even then, it is generally said that the Nepalese commanders in some areas were more violent, and there was the destruction of life and property of the people of those areas. And it is said that the unification war during the time of Bahadur Shah was more violent than the wars fought under the regency of Rajendra Lakshmi and under the guidance of Bahadur Shah. It is generally that during the time of Bahadur Shah, all right, those states which voluntarily surrendered before the Nepalese army, the autonomous status was retained and there was less violent activity. But those states which resisted the Nepalese army, there was the large destruction of the life and property of those areas. Anyway, that's why the historians of Nepal, especially after 1990, after the form of Panchayat system, when they write about the unification of Nepal, then they use one word in Nepali, Rakta Ranjit. Raktarangit Ekikara. The unification of Nepal was bloody unification. It is clear because thousands of people died and there was the destruction of the property at a large scale. So there was hue and cry in the conquered area. So this is the viewpoint of most of these stories. Anyway, now almost all the 24 states and 22 states were conquered, and the political boundary of Nepal during Bahadur Shah's time was from Tista to Mahakal. Now the most important question, now we have to mention here is that after the conquest of these territories, after the conquest of 24 and 22 states, the Nepalese army moved forward. They crossed the Mahakali River and they conquered Kumaon and also Garhwal. Now the most important question here is that why the conquest of Kumaon and Garhwal necessary for the unification of Nepal? Because Kumaon and Garhwal were never the parts of Nepal. It was not the part of Nepal, never. Because during the ancient period, the boundary of Nepal was almost of the present day shape. That is, it consisted of the Gandaki region, Karnataka region, then Bagmati region, that is the central, and the Kochi region. These are the only 4 regions. Broadly speaking, Kochi zone, Kochi region in the east, Bagmati region in the center, Gandaki region in the west, and Karnataka region in the northwest. So these were the only 4 regions where the political boundary of Nepal extended during the ancient period. And during the medieval period, it was disintegrated. In the Karnataka region, 22 states emerged, 24 states emerged in Gandaki, 3 states in Bagmati region, that is the Malla kingdoms, and 3 or 4 other states in the Kochi region. So, what I mean to say is that across the Mahakali River, where there was Kumaon and Garhwal, they were never the parts of Nepal. So, it is generally said that the expansion of Nepal across the Mahakali River was a blunder on the part of Nepal. Because, you know, during the ancient period, that I will discuss later on also, there is one inscription of the Gupta emperor of Samudragupta. Have you heard the name of Samudragupta? Samudragupta was a Gupta emperor of India. And in his Iravad inscription, it is mentioned Kamrupa Nepal Kartapura. Kamrup means Assam in the east, then Nepal at the center, and Kartapura means Kumaon and Garhwal in the west. So this is the line of the countries, frontier countries of India. That means Nepal's boundary was extended up to Assam, up to the area of Assam in the east, and Kumaon and Garhwal in the west. That's why Kumaon and Garhwal was never the part of it. And that's why Nepalese expedition, Nepalese military expedition across the Mahakali River was a wide step up. That is the question of it. But Bahadur, during the time of Bahadur Shah, after Nepalese army conquered these 24 and 22 states, it moved forward and it conquered Kumaon. Then it also conquered Garhwal. But at the meantime, there was a war between Nepal and Tibet in the north, and the Chinese army came to help Tibet, and that's why all these forces in the west were withdrawn to take part in Nepal. And that's why Kumaon was conquered. The Kumaon was kept under the control of the Nepalese commander, whereas Garhwal was not fully controlled. Garhwal was not fully conquered, and that's why a treaty was signed according to which Garhwal would pay some compensation to Nepal, and Garhwal would accept Nepal's Switzerland over it. So after signing that treaty, the Nepalese army returned to Kathmandu, and during the time of Bahadur Shah, Nepal's political boundary was extended up to Garhwal. It is clear. Now, at the end of now this second lecture, that is expansion, now I would like to mention a very few words about Nepal-Tibet now, because Nepal-Tibet was also a part of the unification of Nepal, though the Nepal-Tibet War was fought not for the acquisition or loss of any territory. It was purely originated on commercial issues. It is clear. That means neither Nepal wanted to conquer any part of Tibet, nor the Tibetan government wanted to occupy any part of Nepal. So the Nepal-Tibet War was fought not for the territory, not for the conquest of any area, rather it was fought on the commercial question. And the commercial question we have already mentioned. The question was of the least points. The question was of the least points, and which Krishnanarayan Shah could not settle the problem with Tibet. And Pratap Singh Sahab, though he could sign a treaty with Tibet for future, the long remaining coinage dispute was not solved. And that coinage dispute, along with some political causes, led to a war between Nepal. So the first Nepal-Tibet War was fought in 1758. And in that war, the Tibetan government asked for the Chinese help, because at that time Tibet was under the suzerainty of China. Tibet was an independent state, no doubt, but it was under the suzerainty of China. So the Tibetan government requested China for help, but the Chinese government could not help Tibet. And as a result, Tibet was defeated by Nepal. And Tibet was defeated by Nepal, and according to the treaty, according to the peace treaty between Nepal and Tibet, Tibet would pay some compensation to Nepal every year, and Tibet would exchange the Kala Mohor at the rate of 1:2. That means as demanded by Nepal, because Nepal became victorious. So for the 2 Kala Mohor, Nepal would supply 1 pure. That was the demand of Nepal, isn't it? So the first Nepal-Tibet War in 1798 ended in the victory of Nepal and the defeat of Tibet. But the Tibetan government was not satisfied with this treaty, because there was a great loss to Tibet by this treaty. And that's why after 2 years, there was another war between Nepal and Tibet again. And this time, the Chinese government came to help Tibet against Nepal. Because the Chinese government was afraid that if Tibet was defeated by Nepal continuously, there will be Nepal's sovereignty in Tibet, isn't it? China might lose its sovereignty in Tibet. So that was the Chinese fear. And that's why in the first war, the Chinese government did not support Tibet. And that's why Tibet was defeated. But in the second war, the Chinese government sent the Yoga army and fight the Nepalese. And since you are, all of you belong to Nepalese army, my contention in the Nepal-China war is that, whether I may be wrong, I don't know, so you please read it detailedly. You know, in the Nepal-China war, that is in 1791-92, Nepal was defeated because Nepal could not clearly could not understand the strategic planning of the Chinese army. That's it. Because you know, when you see the war between Nepal and Tibet, there were two wars. One was in Kuti and another was in Kero. Have you followed? Nepal had invaded Tibet from both the corners, and there were wars in both the frontiers. And Nepal had equally divided her army both in Kuti and Kero. Now in the second Nepal-Tibet war, before the entry of Chinese army in the war, out of these two war fronts, Kuti was the most important war, where the Nepalese army was dead by the time of the war and several wars. And when the Nepalese army defeated the Tibetan forces, the Tibetan government requested for Chinese help, and the Chinese help came. And what the Chinese army did, it sent a very small force in Kuti. That is my observation. You know, I may be wrong. I have already told you. Because it is the military, question of military studies, about which I am not familiar. So, very small force was sent to Kuti, and which was easily defeated by the British. But the strong army, you know, under Chinese commander Fu Kang-an, the name of the Chinese commander is Fu Kang-an. In Nepalese document, he is known as Changsu. That is the name mentioned in Nepali. Fu Kang-an, that is the name generally given in the Western books. So, the large force of Chinese army under Fu Kang-an secretly came to kill. And the Nepalese army or government could not understand the effectiveness of those Chinese army in Kiev. And what happened? The Nepalese army was waiting for the Chinese army in Kuti, where the small Chinese army was already defeated. But on the other hand, the huge Chinese army marched towards Kerung, and after controlling Kerung, then it moved forward. Drunche and then came to Vedravati. You know, and when the Chinese army advanced by crossing Kerung, then the Nepalese army was immediately shifted from Kuti to Kerung. But it was too late. And the Nepalese army was defeated by the Chinese army.